The important part about the character design over here is that the gorillas don't have legs, so you basically have to just use your hands to move around everywhere.
Yep.
Wait, for a moment, I thought you were talking about real life, and my brain was like, "Wait, what? Gorillas don't have legs?" Hi everyone, welcome to the Naavik Gaming Roundtable. This is the one podcast to stay up to date with all the latest game business news. And today I'm joined by Abhimanyu Kumar, co-founder of Naavik, and Matt Dion, lead product manager at EA and also content contributor at Naavik. Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Matt, how's
Man,
your
good to
corgi
be
doing?
back.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Manu.
Yeah, it's been a bit after the Christmas episode. This is I was telling you guys, my first more serious topic episode in a bit. So let's see how it goes.
Matt, your corgi, how are they doing?
They're doing well. So we have two corgis, and they're both fresh out of the groomers, so they are very floofy right now. Good times.
If I walk in the room, can you show them?
I will. I don't think they will. It's podcasting time, so they're probably not going to come disturb us. But I do have a cat in my lap also, so there's that.
Wow. All the animals.
Mm-hmm.
Before we kick off into the episode, I also want to wish everyone a happy belated Lunar New Year. If you celebrated over the weekend, I hope you had a lot of good time. And today we're going to be covering quite a lot of ground. We'll be discussing Jam City's former leadership that's founding Plai Labs, Playtika's proposal to acquire Rovio, Gorilla Tag VR, and much more, including a spicy take on esports. So this is just very quickly to mark the occasion that Blizzard Games is no longer available in mainland China. So earlier this week, the publishing contract with NetEase expired, and now the games are no longer available, except Diablo Immortal, because that's covered by a separate contract with NetEase. Blizzard shared that they're in talks with another publisher, but that deal is not finished. And even when it's finished, they still have to wait for the licensing to be awarded. And also to clear the air that my prediction was completely wrong, that perhaps if the acquisition of Activision Blizzard went through with Microsoft, that maybe they'd work again with NetEase for the publishing. But considering the very public relationship breakdown between the two companies, I don't see how that could happen. Just a quick question to the two of you. Do you think that the games not being available for an indeterminate amount of time in mainland China, do you think that's going to hurt Activision Blizzard's performance significantly?
Significantly? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly a meaningful chunk of revenue, but you have to think that this scenario was accounted for in the negotiations, right? In the breakup. So I'm assuming that they planned for some downtime.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I think China is definitely a big market for Activision Blizzard. So yeah, it must have been accounted for. Though the other question that I have is what was the whole thing with NetEase's response to Activision Blizzard and all of that drama? And I didn't read that, but what is the whole drama about?
I think we can just cover it. We can classify it as a public breakdown and a bit tit for tat in terms of public comms.
Okay.
A difference of opinion.
A difference of opinion.
So is like the NetEase response like worth a read? Or
I think it is if you like spicy news.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I wouldn't call it, very business informative.
Yeah.
You have a business informative update for us, Manu.
Yeah. I guess a quick update from my side is Carry First. So they just announced a pre-Series B round of 27 million, and this is a company that they started back in 2018, 3-person co-founding team, all from more of the on the finance side of things. So from Morgan Stanley and one other banking entity. um, and and yeah, they kind of wanted to jump into games because they just saw Africa as a market that can be a pretty big growth market for mobile gaming in the future. So yeah, over multiple rounds, they've raised about like 57 million. And yeah, like I said, the most recent round was this 27 million pre-series B. And yeah, I'm actually writing this big Naavik Pro essay about just kind of breaking down the African mobile gaming market and what kind of tailwinds that market is actually seeing. Is it fertile ground? Including in the Sahara region for mobile gaming and stuff. And then yeah, kind of breaking down further how Carry First has performed. But in general, like Carry First has like this multi-pronged strategy to approach the market. In like this 2020 podcast episode with the CEO, he mentioned the mission of the company, and how they want to execute on it, which basically involves acquiring and developing and publishing mobile games as one or two parts of it. The third part is like licensing third party games, and then the fourth part is sometimes acquiring games to essentially like help them improve and relaunch, and they would relaunch it and kind of publish it at scale. So the good news with Carry First is they've kind of, since 2018, they've kind of made like um, progress on each of these strategies simultaneously. And along the way, they've learned also. Probably the strategy that's working the best for them is the licensing third party game stuff. So they're kind of taking this like C limited approach of becoming the local publishing partner for big titles. So for example, Call of Duty Mobile like recently opened South African servers in collaboration with Carry First, and you can immediately just see like the downloads and DAU spike after that point. So there are like some interesting results. And then in 2023, they're gonna like play out this partnership with Riot Games, where they are becoming their local payment partner, and that's where like this pay first technology comes into play. It's probably that whole pay first technology that gets me the most excited about this company, and also kind of explains why someone like Convoy Ventures was an early backer of this company. But that pay first, highly localized payment infrastructure that is mobile first in a country where a lot of people are coming online through smartphones, like something like 90% plus, it makes a lot of sense. And there are a lot of parallels to how India kind of saw its mobile gaming market flourish, with the launch of Reliance Jio in 2015, um, and just like localized payment infrastructure that was mobile first. So lots of parallels over there. And yeah, in general, very interesting company. And yeah, congratulations to them for the new raise. And yeah, pretty excited to see what they'll be doing going ahead. And yeah, and especially how the Riot Games partnership plays out.
I'm looking forward to reading your article on Naavik Pro because it's a gaming market that doesn't get a lot of reporting and attention, and so I'm keen to learn from it. And generally the African continent was way ahead in terms of mobile banking as the primary way to make these transactions, way before digital banks were a fad in Europe. And so yeah, it's very interested to learn more about that. I think also a lot of the audience gets locked out because the platforms don't have like the payment options that are aligned with their, I don't know, most used local options, and how their banking works. And so yeah, I think that payment section is extremely interesting to the growth of mobile games there.
Yeah, the pay first technology is probably like their one of their strongest like scale vectors that they have, which can not only be applied to mobile gaming but even outside of that, in general to apps. They could kind of extend that business line too. But yeah, I would say that gathering a lot of gaming data on Africa was actually pretty hard. It was very surprising to see the lack of data on that.
Yeah.
Um, I was quite lucky that Carry First in collaboration with Newzoo, did like a study of some of the market metrics and stuff. Of course, there would be like some vested interests over there, so maybe the numbers look a little bit rosy, but still, it was a good anchor point.
Yeah, I think we're missing almost a company like Nico Partners does great covering in terms of data and analysis of the Asian gaming market, and we're missing a company that's doing that for the African market.
Yeah, generally it's still like, I would still say it's a pretty small market, relatively, but moving in the right direction.
And so the last update of today before we dive into the discussion topics is The Last of Us Serie driving some game sales. So in the last roundtable, Aaron wanted to do a shout out to the high quality of the debut episode of the series and the level of engagement that achieved. And I think looking at the evidence of the game sale, the impact that it had on the game sales of Last of Us is just yet another evidence of just a correlation between having a high quality transmedia strategy, having a strong IP that people already have a connection with due to gaming, and then how it impacts the game sales. It's almost as if it prolongs a game's life cycle. And we saw this with Cyberpunk. We saw this with the Witcher game as well. So the numbers is that The Last of Us Part 1, which is the PS5 version, it had a 238% spike in sales week on week with that debut episode. And the PS4 version of the game, which is The Last of Us Remastered, had a 322% sales spike. Matt, take us away. What's happening in the City of Jam?
The City of Jam. Okay, so quick update. Maybe not quick update, but news from Jam City and a new venture called Play Labs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the announcement of this new company and what it means for Jam City. But before we get into it, just a bit of disclosure in the interest of transparency. I'm probably going to be a little bit critical and ask some questions, but you should know I used to work at Jam City for about a year. And it's been a while. I was there 2019 to 2020, so it's been a long time since I've been there. But just in the interest of full disclosure, that is sort of my bias coming into this. So
we're going to get some good insider information.
I don't think I have any insider information, actually. As much as I would like to say that I do, unfortunately, I don't. And what minuscule equity that I have in Jam City is not going to be impacted by this one way or another. So I really don't have a horse in this race, but I do have some opinions, which we'll get into. So the news, there was kind of two parts to this. The first little bit that came out was that the CEO and CTO of Jam City were stepping aside, and at first it wasn't announced why. They were moving Josh Iguato, who's the COO and co-founder of Jam City, into the CEO position. Okay, and then it later came out that the reason the CEO, Chris DeWolf, and CTO, Abra Whitcomb, left the company was to go start this new venture called Play Labs. And Play Labs raised $32 million in seed funding, led by Andreessen Horowitz. And Play Labs is, I'm quoting here from the A16Z piece, they're focused on building the next generation of social platforms leveraging AI and Web3. And they are creating a new platform for users to play, talk, battle, trade, and adventure together. They're also building, I'm still quoting here, they're also building an AI protocol platform, which will help with everything from user-generated content to matchmaking to 2D to 3D asset rendering. So very ambitious, very much of the moment with AI and Web3. And, two very experienced founders, right? So Chris and Aber, they were also former MySpace founders. And of course, they were founders of Jam City. So two very successful ventures for them, two very successful entrepreneurs, and completely understandable why they would attract such interest from a venture capital firm. So it's an interesting venture. The connection to Jam City here, outside of the people involved, is that they are taking a game called Champions Ascension, which was Jam City's first foray into Web3 gaming, with them, and the blockchain gaming division from Jam City, which was about 50 people, according to the VentureBeat article that I was reading. Now, as for Jam City, As I mentioned, Josh Iguato is going to take over as CEO. He's a really experienced entertainment industry executive, having worked for major entertainment firms outside of gaming in the past. I've met him. I've spoken to him. He's a very nice guy and very, very experienced, very competent. So I'm sure he's going to do a great job. And also on the board side of things, Sung-Won Lee, who is the former chairman of Jam City, is now moving into the executive chairman role. He is also the president of Netmarble. And why that's important is that Netmarble is the majority owner of Jam City. So just some commentary from Josh Iguato. He said that Jam City is not likely to continue investing in blockchain games in the coming year. So it sort of made sense to spin out Champions Ascension, but that they may revisit blockchain gaming in the future. It's just that it's not the right time for them. And when you look back at the last, let's say, 12 to 18 months of Jam City, we can sort of see why they arrived at that decision. So, all the way back in September of 2021, Jam City had raised $350 million to acquire Ludia. This was following a failed attempt to go public via a SPAC. They ended up acquiring Ludia, which has Jurassic World Alive and a couple of other games, and sort of expanded their presence meaningfully there. But then they also went through a round of layoffs around 4 to 5 months ago, which I think is interesting, given that in the VentureBeat article, they were quoted as saying that they'd been planning this move, the Play Labs move, for the last 6 months. And then the layoffs happened 4 to 5 months ago, which amounted to roughly 17% of the workforce. And that was estimated around 150 to 200 people, which is meaningful. It was across the organization. I guess my question would be like, what does that mean for Jam City moving forward? Like, what are their prospects? I know that they talked in the article about some games they have coming out. They're doing a DC superheroes game. Seems like they're moving away from Web3. Do we think that maybe, let's just talk about Jam City first before we get to Play Labs. Do we think that maybe Netmarble is going to step in here and take a bigger role in Jam City's direction moving forward? What do you all think about that aspect of the story?
I think probably like this person moving into the executive chairman position is more to kind of like help support the new CEO as he kind of steps into his new shoes. I think usually like when, at least in other companies, what I've seen is if there's a new CEO, the old CEO does kind of move into this like chairman position to help train and like complete the transition and things. So maybe that's the case over here. Whether Netmarble like plays a greater role and such, I don't know. I personally haven't even looked into what Jam City's general revenues and general trajectory even is looking like these days. I don't know if you have, Matt, on data.
I haven't looked at the numbers in preparation for this article, but my sort of general understanding is that they haven't had any major hits recently. I think their last big hit would have been Harry Potter, maybe, which was several years ago at this point, or maybe Disney Emoji Blitz is a very successful game for them as well. But they had a game called Wild Things, which ended up after a bit of back and forth, ended up on the Netflix platform. And they had a couple of other games that were sort of canceled or rejiggered in some way. So
yeah, I think they were also pretty like public about the whole IDFA stuff affecting that portfolio and like generally things being in decline, and then they had to like rebuild a lot of internal marketing tech to kind of get things back on track, and they're probably at that point right now. I don't know. My gut says it's not going to change anything with Netmarble. I guess the old CEO and CTO just want to focus, and instead of like Chris, mentoring the new CEO Josh, he just wants to like focus on the new startup maybe, and that's where they're getting like support from Netmarble leadership. I don't know, but again, I haven't like looked into Jam City's like performance as a company and whether they really need any extra guidance, from Netmarble.
I think it's a trend we've been seeing just across the mobile space, that you have to focus. You have to find how to make it work with ATT and how that affects how you design the new games. And especially with blockchain cooling down. And before, I think initially with a hype train, it seemed, yeah, if you make Web3 games, there's this whole new market and you can make these amazing games that people want to come in and play, play to earn. And I think there's just been a realization that actually making a Web3 game is extremely hard. You need different talent in the company, think about games in a different way. And so I can only assume that maybe there was also some kind of disagreement of the direction of the company, that perhaps you have someone in leadership that is extremely passionate about being in the bleeding edge and exploring new markets, whilst other parts of the company want to stay focused. And I think overall, it seems like everyone might be getting a good deal out of this. You have people who want to be working on the bleeding edge, pursuing that. And Jam City gets to refocus and figure out, okay, how do you do mobile free to play within the ATT space?
I don't know. Like I'd probably. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I have a competing theory on that.
I do as well. Go please.
Okay.
Yeah.
maybe we have the same one. My feeling is, so Jam City did want to go public, right, at some point, and then that ended up like not going through. But that doesn't mean they don't want to do that going ahead into the future. Maybe that is still on the cards, but there's no reason like why Jam City could not have just incubated a blockchain gaming team with Chris and the CTO like really focusing on that team all internally in Jam City. Apart from the reason that if they have like these bigger plans of going public and stuff, maybe Jam City just did not want to get into any kind of regulatory hassle that'll come with having like a blockchain department, or just any kind of like crypto connect and stuff.
That's an
And
interesting point.
Netmarble is like based in South Korea, which has a pretty active blockchain gaming scene. Maybe there was like advice from there that was given to Jam City that if you have like bigger plans, then maybe it's better you kind of like spin this out.
Well, I'll disagree with a couple of points that both of you made. One is that like there's no reason. Manu, you said there's no reason they couldn't just incubate. I mean, I think they tried that with Champions Ascension. I don't know. It's difficult to say how successful or not it was because the game isn't live yet. But it's sort of like a kind of an innovator's dilemma in a way. Like it's difficult for a company that's very focused on casual match 3 puzzle games and narrative games and parlor casino games to go then do a Web3 game that's not only a new set of technologies and a different audience, but also it's like from what I understand, it's kind of like a fighting / mid-core hardcore game. So also a different like design space entirely, let's say. So
I mean, I think it's turning out to be a full-fledged MMORPG.
Yeah. So very different, right, from let's say a Cookie
Jam City is better.
Yeah. And then the other thing I would disagree with that you mentioned, Maria, was that it was a good outcome for everyone. I think if I was an employee of Jam City, especially one that was laid off 4 months ago, I would think that this is not a good outcome for everyone. And maybe I just don't have all the information here. This is where I'm going to be a little bit critical, but like, they said that they've been working on this spin-off, this deal for about 6 months, which means that the leadership of the company that went to go do this venture have been working on this idea, this new platform, whatever it is, funded by Jam City. And the employees of Jam City are essentially supporting this endeavor, which they now have no interest in, right? Like if, Jam City is a private company, and they offer, share-based compensation as part of their compensation packages. But if I have a bunch of Jam City shares, I have no interest in Play Labs now, right? So I'm sure that there's lots of information that I don't have available. That's, maybe there was some compensation as part of this spin-off that Jam City gets some share of Play Labs, or there's some funding that goes back to Jam City, or I don't know. I'm speculating at this point, but to me, I would think that if I was sort of working really hard on some casual puzzle games at Jam City, and I see that the execs are working on some completely different project that will have no bearing on the future of Jam City, I don't know. I would feel a little bit conflicted about that. To be clear, like, I'm not criticizing the founders of Play Labs. Like, go pursue it. It seems like a really interesting opportunity. I'm not going to begrudge anyone for, being an entrepreneur and trying something new. I think it's awesome. I'm excited to see what they build. I just think that the optics are a little bit weird, and that if I was an employee of Jam City, which I am not, but if I was, I would be a little bit conflicted, let's say.
Yeah, so there's a cultural angle that's interesting. I think I also agree with that. There could be like this potential, regulatory angle. One third angle that I just thought of based on something you said, like Jam City was actually funding everything, right? And then, I mean, it is like a pretty experimental thing. And, if Chris, basically now they had to raise like 32 million, for this like experimental thing. And there'll probably be like future funding rounds that are coming up. Was it in Jam City's best interest to continue funding all of that? Maybe a spin-off would actually be like,
and they also laid off 150 plus employees during that time span that they were building up this new idea.
Yeah, I seem to remember that. At least looking at LinkedIn, some people during those layoffs were working on Champions Ascension when that happened. And I want to apologize. It was quite insensitive of me to say everyone got a good deal out of this. I definitely didn't consider the layoffs. They definitely didn't get a good deal out of this change. And so one thing that I can't fully comprehend, like 32 million seed round? Is this the economic downturn 2023?
It's a big round, right? Yes, we're in a bit of a downturn from a macro perspective, but Andreessen Horowitz has, plenty of dry powder, right? That they need to deploy at some point. I did not see in the Play Labs announcement whether it came from A16Z Crypto or from the Games Fund. It looked like the people who wrote the announcement were from both funds. So I don't know if it was like a mix of funds or one or the other. So I can't say one way or another, but both of them are very large funds. Let's say that.
But I mean, this is exactly the kind of team that, VCs are looking for.
100%.
In this market, at least. So yeah, from that angle, 32 million, I don't know. Maybe even feels a little bit small. Maybe it could have been a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, AI, UGC, Web3. They got all the buzzwords.
It's all of it at once. Yeah.
Yeah.
You remember Playco's 100 million seed round? Was it a seed round? 100 million or something?
I'd have to check, but I think that's right.
When was that?
That was crazy. That was like
21 or something.
Yeah, 2-3 years back. Let me check.
Yeah, it was 100 million Series A at a $1 billion valuation.
Okay, Series A. Okay, still better.
That was 2020, by the way. That was September of 2020.
The good old days. Continuing on a very spicy topic today, we have now Playtika and Rovio. Well, Playtika's proposal to acquire Rovio.
So yeah, basically what happened is, I don't know, maybe a few days back, Playtika announced that an acquisition offer to Rovio at a 60% premium of what their market cap was at that point. So yeah, feels like a 750 to 800 million deal. They did make, so this offer basically happened at a 9.05 euro per share price, but they did make one offer also back in November to Rovio, which happened at a 8.50 euro price. So this was like a 6.5% increase on that initial offer. Of course, this was like huge news. Everyone, I guess the fire emoji on, the share link of this across different Slacks. I mean, yeah, the fire emoji was there everywhere. So everyone was, quite excited, shocked at the same time, and kind of trying to make sense of it. But yeah, I don't know where should we start. I
You're
guess
keeping me on the edge of my seat, Manu. Tell me your spicy take. I want to hear your spiciness.
okay. I guess I guess my overall take on this deal is Playtika really needs it bad, and Rovio probably doesn't. So, and I tried to like just like through this analysis or through this talk, I'm basically trying to like explain why that might be the case. So yeah, so just kind of starting off with a little bit of how Playtika has reached this position. So they went public in Jan 2021, filed for IPO, then raised 1.9 billion, and had like an opening price of like 33 USD versus their target price of 22. IPO went super well. 2 years later, that happened in Jan 2021. So now we're in Jan 2023. 2 years later, their stock is down, about 50% from the 52-week high. Basically, things are tanking pretty bad at Playtika. Um, and then in Feb 2022, they also, I mean, they kind of saw this coming, right? So in Feb 2022, they also kind of announced, they're exploring strategic alternatives or options, which includes like getting acquired or merging with another entity. And that's when this private equity company called Joffrey Capital wanted to end up purchasing, I think about 25% of a stake in Playtika. I recently learned that whole deal actually fell through in December 2022, and Joffrey Capital's, one of their founding partners, James Liu, he stepped down from the board of Playtika, and he wrote this letter to them basically saying that it's Playtika as an organization has deficient corporate management
Ouch.
capabilities,
Oh, wow.
various conflicts of interest across the board, and just general communication failures. And yeah, in a nutshell, he wasn't really impressed during his time there, and essentially Joffrey Capital also is kind of out. Basically, Playtika really needs to re-strategize, and they desperately need a turnaround strategy. Very high level, like I won't like quote too many numbers over here, but maybe just like talk about the recent, the more like trending stuff. Very high level revenue growth for Playtika is slowing. um, their EBITDA is also dropping. They do have like about like 30 to 35% margins, which is quite good, but still it is kind of flat to dropping. DAUs on top of that are also like continuing to drop. Um, and if you read their monetizing metrics in the earning reports, you'll see like all the monetization metrics are going up, but everyone also kind of knows like when your DAUs are dropping on a portfolio that is majorly dominated by like very old casino titles and very old casual titles, it just means like your payer community is becoming more concentrated, right? So generally not a great sign. All of that kind of means that Playtika is really kind of surviving on a very, very aging portfolio, which will only like move closer and closer towards sunsetting over time. And therefore, organic growth for Playtika, which is essentially new game development, is really, really important.
Yeah. And
Um,
their acquisitions have not been performing as expected with Redacore
yep,
and
yep. So,
closing the, was it seriously the studio that closed?
yep, seriously closed. They did the Redecor acquisition or reworks. They also acquired Wuga. Um, but I mean, they did all these acquisitions in hopes of these studios. Once they get acquired, Playtika will kind of plug those studios games into Playtika's core loop of the business.
Right.
And then it would like start generating more profits, and then they would reinvest those profits into new game development through the newly acquired studios. None of that ended up happening. So I mean, basically the whole of Playtika across all their acquired studios and internal game development houses haven't been able to release a hit since 2017. It's just been way too long. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's so hard to untangle because, it might not be the acquired studios issue in this process? Seems like a complicated relationship with Playtika. I'm not too aware of it, but from the outside looking in, that's the pattern that seems to be going on.
Yeah, potentially it could be like for whatever reason, but ultimately Playtika really needs to like move towards a younger portfolio, just kind of being in this old portfolio of slots games, primarily like making up 50% of their revenue, and other casual games like, and it's basically two games, Solitaire, Grand Harvest, and June's Journey, which makes up most of the other 50%. It's in a pretty precarious position.
So Manu,
anyway,
on that point about moving to a younger portfolio, has Playtika said anything about why they're targeting Rovio? Because that seems like the opposite of young. They were like one of the earliest companies to mobile gaming. They started out with like premium mobile games. So Angry Birds is like quite an old franchise. Have they said anything about why Rovio specifically?
So Playtika hasn't like specifically said anything about Rovio, but I think one can kind of infer it just looking at, Rovio's current performance and also like future plans. Basically, Playtika kind of has like three. I'll get back to the Rovio point, but Playtika just has like three paths in my mind. They also had like a fourth path with the whole Joffrey Capital thing, but that's out now. So the first path is, just active portfolio diversification and organic growth, which means, their current portfolio, like really juicing that in terms of live ops and such, and then, continuing to grow revenues from that. It is working for a portion of the portfolio, which might be their older titles, but, the Reworks acquisition, 600 million, that game has been tanking ever since that acquisition happened. So something is off in, Playtika's, I don't know I forgot what the name of their platform was. The Playtika Boost platform, I think it's called. And that kind of, is their live ops engine. So there's some cracks in that whole core loop of Playtika. The other second path is new game development and organic growth. But yeah, like I mentioned, no new games from, Playtika's ecosystem since 2017. Switchcraft from Vuga, maybe was like one of the big bets, but that's also not really performed well. And I don't know. I really don't know what's happening to it now. But yeah, also in like, Playtika's presentations and stuff, they just never mention how many new games they're working on. So it maybe just communicates a little bit like how important they find that, a little bit. So the new games pipeline is just not mentioned anywhere. And then part 3 is M&A, right? Which they have been doing ever, for like the past few years. But even in the M&A, even in the M&A part, first of all, Playtika has some pretty heavy debt. So they have about 2.5 billion in debt. 25 to about 30% of their operating profits are actually paid back as interest to this debt. So that's like a pretty like meaningful chunk of of operating profits going back into interest payments. They currently have about like 1.2 billion in cash, and just compare that with like the all cash deal to Rovio. That's 67% of their cash and cash equivalents. So if they get Rovio, they're basically left at like 33% of their cash and cash equivalents. So in general, like even the whole M&A path for a target as big as Rovio also feels a little bit off.
Yeah, on the cash front, because I think Rovio is famously known to have a really good cash balance. When you acquire the company, you also get the cash percentage of the company, right? Yeah. So perhaps that's their assumption, is they'll plug the hole because Rovio has really healthy cash balance.
Yeah, I think Rovio is like at about 200 million. So it will, a little bit. It might plug it, but not really make it up in whole. But one other point about the whole M&A path. So this was like an all cash deal, right, to Rovio, and I guess the reason it's an all cash deal is because like nobody wants Playtika stock at the moment, So
Shouldn't be laughing.
So it's kind of like, I mean, I guess Playtika is kind of like backed itself into a little bit of a corner over here where, their stock
Yeah.
is kind of down the drain. They can't really use that as, a financial lever. They do have the cash, but they can't. I mean, if they spend 67% of their cash on a Rovio acquisition, that's like, not even shooting yourself into the foot, but you're cutting off a leg entirely. Uh, and yeah, they have like this heavy debt, and it wouldn't make sense to raise more debt to fuel any acquisition, because they're
Yeah.
paying a lot of their operating profits as interest. Anyway, so Playtika is in a corner. I
Can I ask a question,
it
Manu?
Yeah.
Or
Just one comment. Is it
okay,
like
okay.
relatively clear to you guys like why they need why they need this?
Well, this is why I want to put it across because I'm not sure if
Okay.
I'm understanding it correctly. So from everything you said, what I'm concluding is that Playtika has a lot of debt and they're struggling to find the next hit game. From what we've seen in the mobile gaming ecosystem, companies that relied on centralizing their games with like this live ops UA platform, they're struggling because ATT really created some chaos in how it was operating. Now we look at Rovio, and Rovio is a profitable company. It has shown stability. It has great cash flow, undervalued company, an IP. Like essentially acquiring Rovio is almost just a secure cash flow that you get into your company.
Rovio has like all the cards in its hand. Like if Rovio is not like seeing this, like they can they can kind of like define the price, I feel, to Playtika for all
Yeah,
the
but
because of all the points that you said right now.
so I'm understanding
Um,
correctly that this proposal to acquire Rovio is to get their stable cash flow to keep funding Playtika trying to rejuvenate their portfolio and move away from underperforming genres.
I think it's maybe less. The cash flow is definitely a part of it. I think it's more about just acquiring a stable business that has shown consistent stability and growth over time. Even though that growth is not like, exponential or anything like that, it's stable and it's consistent and it's a healthy business. Even and yeah, there are a few caveats, okay, like 82% I think, or 80% of their entire revenue is only Angry Birds games. Okay, fine, but it is still a healthy business that maybe is getting a little bit undervalued in the market right now. But the other thing um, that Rovio has is a new games pipeline, and that's what that's what also Playtika really needs. So Rovio keeps mentioning that they have like 10 new games in development. A lot of them are like various Angry Bird IP spin-offs, but also they have this Ruby game studio that's kind of also shifting from hyper casual to these hybrid casual games. And yeah, they also did Small Town Murders, which saw some early success, even though now it's not really there. But yeah, Rovio does have like some proven ability to kind of put out new games, even
Yeah,
though most of
and
them are taking like the Angry Birds IP, but it does have like that proven ability.
we've seen Rovio perform well with UA when a lot of companies were struggling to scale their UA operations, and I believe in one of their recent games, is it Angry Birds Dream Journey? What's it called?
Dream
Uh,
Blast, maybe.
Dream Blast. Yeah, looking at their data, it seems like they've managed to crack live ops. So they're also improving their portfolio and how they operate with the live free to play model.
Yeah, I think like, yeah, probably like Rovio's more active portfolio and the portfolio that contributes to like 82% of their revenue, it would still be like the aging, on that track of an aging portfolio. So like if the deal goes through, then Playtika's portfolio just becomes a little bit more old. uh,
Mm-hmm.
but but again, Rovio has like some proven track record in kind of creating new games. They also have a healthy new game pipeline, and those are two things that Playtika really needs. And it seems like Playtika needs it to an extent where they want to like basically give away like 67% of their cash balance to kind of make it happen. So overall, yeah, Rovio. So yeah, why would Rovio, or why does Playtika want Rovio? Yeah, the new game pipeline, but it is, it may be a little bit unproven. Then Rovio has these like stable profits, slow and steady, and but at the same time they have like an aging portfolio of games. Rovio also has like very very low debt, about 6.3 million in debt. So it's, yeah, insignificant versus their cash balance, which is also like really good for Playtika. And Rovio has a constantly growing cash pool. Again, slow and steady. But yeah, it'll not make up for 800 million of acquisition, full cash acquisition.
So
Yeah.
I think my prediction is that this deal's not going through, and I feel like that's our general prediction here, and the prediction of the industry. But the question I keep coming back to is: does Rovio even have a price tag to which they would sell to Playtika? Because from what I've heard, the culture of studios in Finland is extremely different to Playtika's culture of leadership and operations, and also I think Rovio absorbed quite a lot of talent when Seriously when Playtika closed the Seriously studio. Yeah, I culturally would Rovio accept this acquisition, even if the price was, I don't know, all of the cash flow that Playtika has.
I don't know. I'll probably like trust Mika's opinion on this and what he wrote like in Naavik Digest, where he was saying that the Finnish gaming community is very very tight knit. So yeah, I'd probably like trust Mika's opinion on the cultural aspect of things. He did mention in his Naavik Digest piece that um, the Finnish gaming community is a very tight knit one, and um, just looking at the way things went with Seriously, and that developer community now getting also spread across Rovio, looking at how reworks and redecor's performance has kind of gone after the acquisition. Um, yeah, the general mood towards Playtika in Finland maybe isn't really in the best place. So yeah, that was his take, and Mika is usually right about things. So
it is interesting that they decided to go back to the well of Finnish gaming companies, given sort of the public criticism that has come out about the cultural differences between Playtika and Seriously. I wonder if maybe Playtika doesn't really care. Maybe they just want the IP and the business, and they don't care so much about the employees per se. To your point, Maria, about like, is there a price that Rovio would accept this? I think there has to be, because Rovio is a publicly traded company, and so at a certain point, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to accept the best deal. But I don't know. It will be interesting to see what that price is if they can find it.
Yeah, and just given like all the numbers and all this background, I feel Rovio can kind of set the price to a really good extent. They have like really strong negotiation leverage. So, but yeah, it was at least good to see that, and this was like an opinion from the Invest Game newsletter, which I found quite smart, that it was good to see that even though this, that enterprise value to revenue multiple pre-announcement was 0.8. After the announcement, Rovio stock did shoot up, and also the value that Playtika is putting on this brings that EV to revenue multiple more than the 1.5 1.6 range, which is actually closer to the still fronts of the world. So in a way, Playtika is actually bringing like Rovio's valuation more in line with the market with this. So yeah, just another perspective to kind of measure that offer with. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But yeah, overall, sorry, one last comment. Overall, yeah, my prediction is also yeah, it's not looking too great for Playtika. I'd be pretty skeptical if Rovio kind of goes ahead with this, but I don't know. Maybe Rovio makes a counter offer that Playtika cannot refuse. So, but or yeah.
We'll have to wait and see then. Hopefully someone will figure it out. AK, Matt.
Yeah, we don't talk about VR that much on the podcast, but we're going to delve into it a little bit here. So specifically, we're going to talk about Gorilla Tag VR. So you may have heard about this. It's kind of the latest sort of VR sensation. It's sort of overtaken Beat Saber as the title in VR. Recently, this coverage, I think, is from early January or December. It had accrued more than 26 million in IAP revenue, which I think is pretty impressive for a VR game. And if you haven't seen this game or played it, basically it's the classic children's game of tag, but everyone is a gorilla, and you kind of swing around the map with your arms as the way to move around. So that's how you kind of like swing from branch to branch, or you propel yourself around the map. And while I'm probably not doing a good job of describing the motion, apparently it's like really simple and intuitive to pick up. This was like this was discussed in the VentureBeat article about it, where they sort of prototyped this movement system first, and then they added the gorilla part of it later because it made so much sense to the early playtesters and the developers. I guess they've now added a tutorial, but initially there was no instructions, and it was just that intuitive that you could just pick it up and go. So, why has Gorilla Tag VR been successful? There's only 4 modes, right? And 3 of them are variations of tag. The 4th mode is it's like a just chat mode. It's a social mode. And so this social aspect has been really key, I think, for the success of Gorilla Tag VR. And you see that in some of the other successful applications on VR, like Rec Room or VR Chat. It's very heavily social. And let's see, just a couple of statistics here. A peak MAU of 2.3 million, and they had 760,000 playing on Christmas Day alone. And Christmas Day tends to be a pretty big day for VR. Usually a bunch of people get VR headsets and try it out for the first time. And so you see a spike in activity and engagement on that day. This particular game, Gorilla Tag, is available on MetaQuest and Steam, but it is not available on PSVR yet. Let's see. So I covered the strong social element. It also benefited from virality on TikTok. I am taking the media coverage for their word here because I am not on TikTok, so I don't know this firsthand. But apparently it sort of caught on with TikTok. They've not really done any formal direct marketing themselves, the developers. So, really impressive outsized success for a small team. And then I thought this was kind of fun. One article even recommended it as an interesting way to work out in VR, get an upper body workout, get some cardio in. So I guess you can adjust the how do I describe this? Like the motion kind of, yeah. So like it's the distance that you travel based on the force that you put into the arm motion can be adjusted so that it's more or less. So you can get like a more or less of a workout, let's say. Like
so you have your
pull
arms
harder.
You have your arms up in the air because you're swinging from the branches, is it?
You can. So if you're just like traversing straight ahead, you kind of like do like a skiing motion where you're like, you have your arms forward and then you push back and you sort of propel yourself with your arms. But you can swing from branch to branch.
The important part about the character design over here is that the gorillas don't have legs, so you basically have to just use your hands to move around everywhere.
Yeah.
Wait, for a moment I thought you were talking about real life, and my brain was like, "Wait, what? Gorillas don't have legs?"
Mind blown, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like visually, it's very simple. Let's say it's not like this really like HD experience, it's closer to like Minecraft style graphics. It's very kind of pixelated. It's all gorillas. All the monetization is like cosmetic IAP. So you see a bunch of gorillas and silly hats and shirts and stuff jumping around, and you can easily understand why it's like a very social kind of silly game.
And
so
maybe Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Matt knows this little tidbit, but I don't know, Maria, if you do. But one of the other reasons that it kind of became quite viral is it's also like the whole TikTok thing, right? But basically, what was happening on TikTok and like Twitch streams and YouTube videos is because you kind of have to like move around in this game using your arms, and because you're in VR, you kind of have the feeling to maybe move your legs a bit. People were basically just bashing into furniture in their house and breaking fingers and legs, and they broke furniture pieces and whatnot. And a lot of I was watching like YouTube videos before this recording, and there were just a bunch of videos of people just screaming like, "Ah, dude, oh shit, man, I broke my arm. Oh, dude, I broke my leg." And that's just the video. Like you forget about the game and just kind of enjoy the pain, I guess. But
Enjoy the pain.
Yeah, by hearing the pain. But anyway, sorry, Matt.
No, that's okay. I mean, we've kind of covered like what is Gorilla Tag VR. I would encourage you to watch the videos if you've not seen any footage of this game. It does look pretty fun, I have to admit. I don't have a VR headset, but it looks pretty fun. So, we talked about like what makes it successful, and kind of the segue I want to make here is, what does this tell us about the VR gaming market generally, and VR as a gaming platform? And so I'll just give you a quote from the COO of the developer. They're called Another Axiom, and I'll turn it over to you for a bit of discussion here. So, contrary to a lot of public discourse, this is the COO, VR is in a really, really good place right now, and things are getting better. A message we want to share for the VR industry is that it's possible for developers to have a meaningful hit in VR, and the audience wants content. What do you guys think about that? Do you think do you think that this is an outlier? Do you think that VR is a viable platform to develop on? What do you think?
I disagree with his last comment about people want the content.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, I guess like the simple stat anyone can like look up is how many. So like Steam has like Steam VR also, right? And you can look up game launches in Steam VR over time, and that number peaked in 2017 after like the 2016 hype. And ever since, it's been going down. The number of VR game launches has actually like dropped quite a bit. I think in 2022 it was like closer to 500 versus 1,000 in 2017. So that's definitely a function of just like general market sentiment around, both from the consumer and maybe even the developer side. I guess developers, from the developer angle, if I had to like summarize it in one sentence, a lot of developers need to be convinced about building content for a platform that maybe has a little unknown future in a little in some way, and that's a hard thing to convince developers of, who have limited budgets and limited time, and they want to maximize returns. So yeah.
I just want to jump in on that it's already hard to build a cross-platform game where you build it for console and then you need to port it, I don't know, to Switch and then mobile. That's difficult already. And we actually seen with PlayStation VR 2, it's not backwards compatible with the first edition. And so now the developers are essentially having to reprogram the inputs. There's quite a lot of investments to keep up with how the platforms change in VR. And so it's not only the future that's uncertain of the platform in and of itself, but it has a very short life cycle for how long your game can also bring in the revenue.
As you both rightly point out, there's a bit of a chicken and an egg problem, right? The audience will not come if there aren't hit games, and developers will not develop hit games if there is no audience. There is this stat that VR advocates like to point to, which is that VR headset shipments are on track to surpass console shipments over time. And while that is impressive, shipments is not the same thing as engagement and audience. So, like when you ship a PS5 or an Xbox, gamers are going to get hundreds of hours out of that because there's a whole ecosystem of games and apps for them to use on that platform, and they hang on to it for multiple years. Whereas VR headsets are still developing, there's not that ecosystem of games, and you're not going to I would think you're not going to play VR games for 2-3 hours in a session, because it's just like physically it's difficult, right? There's all sorts of issues with that. So it's not quite apples to apples.
I'd also say like it's not just like, you know, the audience wouldn't come if they don't want, if the content doesn't exist. But I also have a feeling like the difference between an Xbox and a VR headset is that you don't need to put the Xbox on your head, right? It's
Yeah.
there, and you have a controller in your hand, and you can, like, you know, survive for like 2-3 hours of gameplay. Elden Ring, getting your ass kicked, you know, get your ass kicked for 6 hours, no problem. But you know, you don't want to like end up puking while playing a game,
Yeah.
right? And so I feel there's also just like a general form factor issue. So even though, like, you know, units are kind of going up, and that is true, it's, when you ask the question about do people want it and really like mass market, do people want it, I feel it's also just like a general form factor issue with this thing.
Mhm.
But AR glasses, I mean, if these glasses of mine were, you know, AR glasses, and they solve like the, you know, 2-3 hours no dizziness issue, why not? You know, I just don't want like this huge ass headset on my head, you know. So,
Yeah,
but
Matthew Ball released I think it was yesterday. Wait, we're recording. When are we? Earlier this week. Recently, a very interesting deep dive into VR and the technology and what are the issues that it has to solve. And even if it is possible to solve the issues that it requires to build games that are, I don't know, AAA immersive experiences like that on VR. And I think the market is just in the early adopter phase. There's a lot of rotation in terms of hardware. You invest a significant amount of money. There's not a lot of content, and a few years later, you have to keep replacing it to keep up with the best improvement on it. And also, my experience with VR games is it was interesting, but also disappointing, because even though there's already limited content, and I had to play many games to find a game that didn't make me motion sick for me to play. So then it's an even tiny sliver, you know, depending on how much your body can take with with how with how it works. Yeah, I think mass market is still a way, and I honestly don't see how it's going to be possible to reach that level of AAA in a VR headset for another decade.
Just to like maybe put some numbers to the conversation. So, you know, one question that we can also ask is the tech really selling? And this is like to Matt's point about the whole VR shipment stat versus console. So since 2019 up until the end of 2022, there have been about 10 million plus units of the Quest 2 that have been sold. Or not the Quest 2, but just in general, like VR tech. But 80 to 90% of that market share is the Quest anyway. So it's basically that. In the same, or like, yeah, over the same time period, if you were to just compare that to Xbox, you know, Series X, that's about like 20 million units, and PS5 is 30 million units. And I guess maybe that's why like a lot of the, you know, VR maxis are kind of saying that, yeah, that are kind of bringing that stat up. But I kind of went into a little bit of a rabbit hole to maybe like, you know, is there a way to kind of prove numerically that the VR is not going to be a thing? So so this was kind of looking at what Meta is doing, and like this massive $36 billion investment that they're kind of putting into Reality Labs, I guess it's called, right? So yeah, the question I try to ask is VR kind of generating revenue for Meta? The answer is a big no, but here's how it kind of breaks down. Very recently, Meta started like showcasing a different revenue line item and cost line items for Reality Labs, so you can kind of like back calculate a lot of stuff. So since 2019 until like Q3 of 22, the total revenue has been 6 billion. 75% of that is hardware. So that's about 4.5 billion. And 25% of that is software, which is 1.5 billion. And software is basically revenue coming in from the Quest store, IAPs and like game purchases and stuff. 6 billion in revenue, total cost 36 billion. So they're negative 30 billion in the whole to basically break even. Let's assume that today Meta gets any further cost down to zero. Let's say that the total cost continues at 30 billion to essentially break even. And assuming that same 75 to 25 percentage split on hardware to software, Meta would need to make 22.5 billion on hardware, which at a $400 price equates to 55 to 60 million units of that hardware. A lot of market research firms itself are estimating that the VR market is going to be like a $15 billion market in 2027. And, Meta needs to like make up 30 billion in cost. So, of course, like that, I don't think that's going to happen. Like 55 to 60 million units getting sold. I don't know. It just doesn't feel possible. And that's where like the pressure is really on Meta to kind of juice the software side of it, right? That's where they would like make really scalable profits through their store. And yeah, then it basically comes down to games. Like where does Meta actually get the content? And then it goes back to what Matt was saying, that whole chicken and egg issue with the content. And we already know, like through the Steam VR stats, the number of games are actually going down. Developers are just not convinced about building for this technology. And over and above, there's the form factor issue that we kind of discuss. So I don't know, even from the numbers angle, it just didn't add up.
There's reason to be skeptical of some of the numbers too. One of the points I found interesting from the Matthew Ball piece was that some of the hit titles on VR, Rec Room, VR Chat, they don't even require VR anymore. Like you can play it on quote unquote 2D devices. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Gorilla Tag went to 2D platform of some sort. Twin sticks, kind of makes sense with the arm movement things. I don't know. Maybe I'm oversimplifying, but the point is, like, when you see numbers around like user counts for these VR apps, like it's important to look at the split of how many are actually doing it in VR versus on a console or a mobile device or something, because it's I guarantee it's not like an even split.
Yeah, I just want to say maybe just make one comment on the content in VR games. So yeah, Gorilla Tag really, really looks like a fun game. When I just have YouTube videos to access the experience, but yeah, a lot of the VR games, like Matt also mentioned, they just have also short life cycles. They aren't really built from a live operations aspect, So Gorilla Tag, even through the videos I was watching, you've watched like a 15-minute video and you can already see like that gameplay has a super high novelty factor. But then as the session continues, these are streamers, so they're trying to like keep things entertaining, but you can also start to see, okay, when it kind of gets a little bit fake entertaining. So the novelty factor like kind of just wears off quite quickly also. But either way, super interesting game and quite innovative and definitely look fun.
Yeah, and when you're talking about Meta being able to recover the investment that they've been making, I almost feel it's the race. We'll see who doesn't give up and doesn't mind keeping on sinking in the R&D, and they're essentially carving out a new market and leading it. And can they ever hope to recover the costs of that R&D? I think we've seen Microsoft. They've bowed out of the race. I believe a lot of their layoffs was from the mixed reality
HoloLens.
tech tool, also the HoloLens. They were getting the funding from a US deal with the defense. I think they were struggling with the performance of what they were delivering. So yeah, Microsoft's bowed out. We still see Apple continuing to pursue this. I guess magically even in the game anymore.
They were acquired or mostly acquired by a Saudi company, I believe.
Oh, the
and
Saudi
they're
investment
doing like
fund.
enterprise applications.
Right. So Meta might win from by default. We'll have to see what Apple releases.
Yeah, I just hope like, yeah, at the end of the day, like if the revenues actually come out of the software side of things and they're able to like build a great store experience that has a lot of great content, and VR games get to a point of becoming live operated experiences, and all of those transactions are kind of going through the store. Meta would face, or would Meta would have a really great shot at making up a lot of this investment and all the future investment that they
Mhm.
would do. But yeah, it's a lot of ifs until that point.
Yeah.
And also, I really hope like Meta is just thinking about the form factor of things, and they're just not stuck on this idea of a big headset on your head. Um so yeah, I just hope they're also thinking about that and evolving the form factor in a way that fits for mass market much better.
Yeah. I think we need to touch this topic again in 2 years. See where we're at.
Or 5.
Or 5. We'll all still be together and happy, right?
Yes.
Okay.
watching Overwatch League in VR.
In the metaverse. Yeah.
If you enjoyed today's episode, you can help us reach others by subscribing on your preferred platform. We always enjoy hearing from you, so leave us a comment on YouTube. You can also sign up to the free Naavik Digest newsletter and listen to other podcast content, because we have industry leader interviews and our Crypto Corner talk about Web3 gaming. Matt, Manu, thank you so much for joining today as usual, and we'll see you next week.